Hi, it's the Chappiness guy. Brain tumor, acoustic neuroma, vestibular schwannoma. Those are some of the names of the tumors that can happen in someone's head or brain. And our special guest today for this episode of Vestibular Talks is Sara. Sara wrote a book called Sickbed to Summits, The Story of Triumph Over Adversity by Sara Crosland. She wrote a book about her own experience living through a brain tumor or an acoustic neuroma and how she survived the surgery, the recovery process, and how she's moving forward with her life. This book is a brilliant book. It describes in detail her own experience, her struggles, her success, and her ongoing life after being diagnosed with a brain tumor. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. On your happiness, guys.
Life before that kind of. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
All right, Sara, we're live. So, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for being part of this episode of Vestibular Talks. I've been really looking forward to chatting with you after reading your book, which is brilliant, by the way. I loved it. I read a lot of books. I read about 1 to 2 books per month, and I read your book twice because I was so into it. I'm like, and every time that I put it down, I'm like, oh, maybe a little bit more. And I was like, it was a good book. And like, congratulations on that. So that's
Thank
good.
you.
Well
And thanks for asking me along.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. Sarah, will you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and how your journey began?
Sure. Okay, so I'll take you back a couple of years. So 2017, I was working as a high-level teaching assistant in a primary school over here in the UK. I worked with children who had various special educational needs. So I was dealing with children who had autism, ADHD, hearing loss, quite ironically, all sorts of behaviour issues. And, I really enjoyed my job. However, I'd also taken up the hobby of photography and I wanted to develop that a little further. So I'd also set up my own little studio and was really, things were just starting to fall into place and, slight change of direction. And you know how it is, life then goes and throws you a bit of a curveball. So at the end of 2018, I was tired. I thought it was work. I put it down to, working long hours at school. It's Christmas. You've got all the children's Christmas performances going on and, all that side of things. The studio was really busy as well. My dog wasn't well. And we had to, I think I mentioned in the book, we had to take the decision to have him put to sleep, which was, the kindest thing, for him. Although, I missed him a great deal. And a couple of days after that happened, I woke up in the morning and I had really bad pain in my joints. And it started off in my hips. So I just thought, I'm getting too old to sleep on floors. I shouldn't be doing this anymore. Because I'd spent the last day with the dog sleeping on the floor with him. So I just thought, I'll be fine in a couple of days. It wasn't, and it got worse, and it spread from my hips down to my knees, to my ankles, and within a week, every joint in my body was in absolutely excruciating pain.
Okay.
So I went to my doctor, and this is kind of where it all started. So my doctor ran blood tests. They came back pretty clear. The only thing that was picked up was slightly high inflammatory markers and a vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D deficiency can cause joint pain. So I thought, great, we'll take the pills, I'll be fine. But it didn't, and it didn't get any better. And then I started to develop other symptoms which were a bit more of a concern. So the fatigue got worse. I had numbness in my face just here, just like, but not even numbness really. It was just like a different kind of sensation. And also my taste buds were slightly affected. And when I looked out of my left side, my vision was double. And it was fine, straight on's fine, looking that way is fine. But on my left, if I just glanced that way, it was all double. And I thought, this isn't right. Doctor agreed with me. And to cut a long story short, I was admitted to hospital for an MRI because we were also investigating things like MS, multiple sclerosis, Lyme disease, because I'd had a tick bite the previous year. And again, that came back negative. So yeah, I went for my MRI about 3 or 4 days later. It was actually the 20th of February. So it's coming up to that time of year now where lots of memories. Yeah, so I went and had the MRI and I came back home. I think the appointment was around 11 in the morning. I came home for lunch and probably within an hour I'd received a phone call asking me to go back. And I just knew they'd found something, because when I was in the, you know, having the MRI taken, and you have a little mirror above, so you can look at the room at the far end. And I could see them all sort of, you know, looking at the screen, and then another person came in and they were looking at the screen, and I just thought, no, this isn't good. However, I went back, I saw the consultant, and he said, oh, you know, we found this, and the screen was already there. And then he said, oh, do you want to see it? I thought, well, I already have. Now I'm quite inquisitive. Yeah, tell me what it is, because obviously it was really obvious. It was like a golf ball sized blob, you know. I knew it shouldn't be there. And he explained to me that he thought it was an acoustic neuroma, wasn't 100% sure, but, you know, he'd already made a referral for me to be seen by a neuro consultant. So yeah, that was the start of it, really.
It's really overwhelming, and especially the fact that it grew to that size without really giving you other symptoms. Like by the time that it gave you the symptoms, it was almost like too late, because now it was fairly big, and it was affecting you greatly, like your vision, as you said, seeing double when you turn to that side, feeling a weird sensation of kind of like a tickle or a numbness on this side of your face. These are symptoms that you kind of think like what is happening, because they're not like, oh, I just have a headache, or I have a cough. Like this is something that is quite different. So you wonder what is going on with my body. Sara, what happened then after the doctor told you this is what it is, and then how will we proceed after? Like, what was the solution or the treatment that they offered?
Okay, so I went to see a consultant in Manchester in a hospital called Salford Royal, and I found out later that this hospital is actually a centre of excellence for dealing with acoustic neuromas in the UK. I think they're ranked second in the world for dealing. Yeah, so I got really lucky. The consultant that I saw there, Scott Rutherford, absolutely amazing. He was like this. I mean, I came away from the initial diagnosis and I just felt, I don't think I felt anything. I just felt sick. I felt overwhelmed. I thought I was going to die. I thought Neil was telling me that, so Neil's my husband, he was telling me, you know, everything's going to be fine. We'll get you fixed. We'll make you better. And I'm thinking, you're just saying that. That's what you want to happen. I have no clue. Anything could have happened. So, yeah, I saw the consultant. He was just like this totally calm individual, you know, that just calms the crisis. And he just seemed so knowledgeable about it all. And he explained to me, because there'd been a mix-up between the two hospitals. So when I went to see him, he hadn't actually received the MRI images. So I was having to explain to him what I'd seen. And he seemed a little sort of, you know, dismissive. When I explained to him how big it looked on the actual images, he said, oh, well, they're quite slow growing tumours, you know, they only grow about 2 millimeters a year. We've got loads of time to deal with this. And, he said, I'll have a look at the images tomorrow, and they come over, and I'll give you a call back. And so the following day he called me, and he said, oh yeah, you were right about the size. So it was about 3.5 centimetres by the time I was diagnosed. It was also cystic, and I think that's why I'd had no symptoms very early on. You know, it had all sort of gone crazy all at once, and I think it was probably the cyst, because the cyst was quite sort of unpredictable and fast growing, whereas the tumour is slow growing. So all of a sudden, this cystic growth on the tumour had grown quite rapidly, and that's what had put a lot of pressure on. You know, obviously the parts of my brain that deal with my vision, the facial nerve, you know, and I think that's probably why I'd not really experienced anything up until that point. And yet I've spoken to other people since who have had tumours that are like 2-3 millimetres when they're diagnosed, and they have so many symptoms. So it's one of those, you know, from person to person, it can vary so greatly. And also, you know, one of the main symptoms that people look out for is hearing loss. Well, I went for a hearing test and had 100% hearing, you know, and so I think mine, rather than sort of growing into my ear canal and causing hearing loss, it was now growing in towards my brain stem, and that's what was causing a lot of the problems that I had, which weren't just the face. I was also experiencing things like high blood pressure. My resting heart rate was, which I know is normally mid-50s because I'm quite active, it was 110 when I was resting. So I was exhausted, probably because my body thought I was doing a marathon 24 hours a day. But yeah, so Scott Rutherford was a really, you know, great guy, loads of advice. He did say to me though on that phone call, he said, you know, when I said that we had time, you know, to plan things out and decide on a course of action, he said, actually, I don't think we have, because it's, you know, clearly it's growing quite rapidly. It's behaving unpredictably, and where we might have considered things like radiation treatment, you know, less invasive treatments, basically. He said, you know, surgery, because of the size now, is your only option. So I was left then knowing that I'd have some quite potentially unpleasant side effects from the surgery. There was risk of permanent damage to my facial nerve, difficulty swallowing, permanent double vision. You know, the surgery itself involved severing the hearing and balance nerve. So I knew I would have profound hearing loss on one side, and I also lost effectively 50% of my balance. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's so overwhelming. And Sarah, from the research that I've done, those kind of tumors nowadays they seem to be more common, but before they seem like they weren't really as common or as diagnosed as they are now. So probably for you, when it happened, you were probably kind of in a state of shock or a state of awe, because to hear, oh, you have a tumor in your head, like that's something that you don't expect or want to hear from any doctor. So when they told you this, like you're probably like, what? Like how is this? Like I mean, having a tumor anywhere else in the body sucks, but in your head, where your brain is way more sensitive, and you feel more vulnerable because you don't know, like you said, the treatment, like the surgery, the kind of side effects that you might have from a surgery like that are quite debilitating in a person's life. So now they said, okay, we're going to do surgery. Now you're experiencing more symptoms. What happens after?
So I took part in a treatment called Gentamicin Treatment. So gentamicin is an antibiotic which is it's used to treat various illnesses, but a side effect of it is that it's ototoxic. It damages the hearing and balance mechanisms within your ear. But it was used with the intention of doing that. So rather than go into surgery and have, you know, wake up with your brain not knowing what the hell's happened, because half your balance is gone, your hearing's gone, you know, you're falling on the floor because you've got no balance. What happens with the gentamicin is, I think I had the course of 3 injections over the period of about a month, and it was given at it was sort of low dose, but you know, quite a it was quite unpleasant, let's say.
I can imagine.
It was lie on your side and have a big needle like this through your eardrum into your inner ear, but it was with the intention of gradually removing your balance function. So it was a gradual process, and during that time your brain's got time to compensate on the other side and get used to it. Because many people with acoustic neuromas find that when they, or if and when they eventually need surgery, they've actually learned, because the balance has been so affected by the tumour anyway, that their brain has compensated. So for many people, it's not an issue. My balance was really very good when I was diagnosed, probably because I was quite active anyway. Like I say, my hearing was perfectly fine. So those 2 sort of diagnostic tools, if you like, that people would look out for, they were functioning fine. Yeah, so the gentamicin was given over about a month, I think it was. So I was diagnosed in February 2018. I started with the injections in, I think it was the middle to the end of March that year, and then I had surgery booked for the 12th of May 2018. But I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks prior to that, I'd had a friend come round to visit me, and as that day had gone on, I'd woken in the night with a really bad headache, and I just thought, just take some paracetamol, try and get back to sleep. And you know, I did, and I got up the next day. I felt rotten, but I got up and did as much as I could. But I was just constantly sick throughout the day at this point. A friend came to visit, and I just felt awful. So I said, "Look, I'm really sorry. Can you please go? I'll see you another time." And she was really understanding. She was great. She said, "Yeah, no problem." Off she went, and she'd been gone probably about 2 minutes, and I started being really violently sick, and I had the most debilitating headache I've ever had in my life. It's up there with childbirth, if not worse. But it was yeah, nothing like I've ever experienced. It was just like being hit on the back of the head with a plank of wood. I had like really, it was like having a vice, you know, my head in a vice around the back of my head. And I said to my husband, you know, I said, this isn't right at all, you know. I know I've got a tumour and I know I've got headaches, but this is just on another level. I didn't want to go to hospital because there was some sort of administrative mix up at one point, which meant that the hospital I should have been seen at had misplaced paperwork, and that's why I'd ended up going to the Manchester hospital. So I knew if I'd gone to my local hospital, they'd transfer me there, which is what happened. So my husband took me to our local hospital. I had a CT scan and they said, yeah, you've got a bleed. So we're going to have to transfer you to the nearest neurological unit, which was in Liverpool. So I was taken there by ambulance, and then to cut a long story short, I was then transferred to Manchester once I'd stabilised. I was treated with steroids, which seemed to stop the bleed. And I spent a couple of days in hospital and then came back home. And I was just told to sort of, right, you know, get yourself well, get yourself strong, wait it out for a couple of weeks to the planned date. So yeah, it was the longest couple of weeks in my life.
And you really describe all of this in the book in depth. And you talk about the symptoms, you talk about how debilitating they were, you talk about how the loss of balance meant almost like a loss of independency to you, because as you said, you were so active, you exercised frequently, you did a lot of things, and losing your balance put you in a place of like now you can't fend for yourself, kind of, because your brain is overwhelmed. It's like, what is happening? Why are we not able to stand straight? And why are we tipping, or why are we falling? So the loss of balance, the way how you really describe it in the book, it almost gave me goosebumps, because I am diagnosed with vestibular migraines. So I do know and I understand what losing your balance feels like and what being dizzy feels like. And the words that you use and how you describe it in the book, it almost made me kind of like be in your place. Like it almost made me be in your shoes because I understand the symptoms so well that I was getting goosebumps and I was like, whoa, like this, just the sensation because the way how you express everything in the book, Sarah, you put such emotion that the words in the book are so vivid. Like even for my wife, that she's perfectly healthy, she never had the symptoms. I let her read parts of the book as I was reading it, and she's like, "Wow, like this almost, it's almost like a movie when you're reading this book. It almost plays as a movie in your head." So you did an excellent job at portraying what happened and what your journey was like. So now finally, they get you in for the surgery. They remove the tumor. What happens after?
So my surgery, I think, was about 9 hours long. I think I can't really remember. And I woke up in the recovery room, and I was surprised. Well, one, I was like, I'm still alive, I think. And I was surprised at just how awake I felt. I didn't really feel any pain because obviously they'd given me lots of all sorts. And I think the most noticeable thing for me, I was struck by, there were 3 nurses in the recovery room with me. One of them was carrying a defibrillator, ready to transfer me to the high dependency unit, and I was like, oh, if they're carrying that, this really has been serious. And I think it kind of dawned on me then. My surgeon popped his head in and said, we've actually managed to remove 100% of the tumour that we can see. And at that point, because we had discussions about this, and he reassured me that rather than compromise my facial nerve, which would have left me with facial palsy permanently, he said, if we're in that situation where we're coming close to damaging it, he said, we will leave a slither of the tumour behind. He said, very often then it just sort of dies on its own, If it does regrow, we can treat it with radiation. He said, you won't ever be in this situation needing surgery again. So that was great. And I think up until that point, I sort of resigned myself to what was going to happen. And I was quite accepting of it, I think, by the time I went for surgery, because I was just so unwell. I knew it was out of my hands. I just knew I had to give control to those people to do their job. And yeah, so to hear those words that he'd removed 100% was such a relief. Yeah. I didn't realise how much of a relief it would be. And then I'd asked the nurse if I could have my glasses back. And she said, sure, pass them to me. I put them on. And I couldn't see. It was like, my eyesight's bad anyway. I've got contact lenses in today, but on my left side, it was like someone had smeared oil all over my lenses. It was just really unpleasant, And I put these on, and I said, they're dirty. Could you give them a clean? She said, no, they are clean. So I put them back on, and I said, I can't see properly what's going on. She said, it can happen. Don't worry,
that's not something you want to hear.
Yeah, but everybody was so reassuring. But I was thinking, I forgot to mention this earlier. I felt so ill prior to my diagnosis that I actually quit my school job. So now I was dependent on photography, and all I'm thinking is, how can I take photographs when I can't see properly? Yes. So I was panicking, and they took me up to my bed in the high dependency unit. And Neil and my mum came to visit just very briefly, I think a few hours after I came out from surgery. And I think they left, and I went to sleep because I was just, I think, hit by sort of adrenaline when I woke up. So I was like on a high up here, and then obviously it crashed. Yeah. And so I slept, and when I woke up, everything had tipped on its side a little bit, and I thought, ooh, I don't like this. So I kind of blinked a few times, and you know, it righted itself. I thought, oh, that's okay, it's just me. And then obviously, you know, later that night I'd gone to sleep, and when I woke up, everything had tipped literally sort of 90 degrees on its side. So I felt like I was ready to fall out of bed. I was lying there hanging on to the rails and trying to press the buzzer to get someone's attention. And I had a nurse that was actually sat in with me the whole night. And she said, no, she said, these things can happen. She said, but I'll mention it to the ward manager when she comes through. I was like, okay. So she mentioned it to the ward manager. Ward manager came to see me. She said, I'll just explain what's happening again. I said, I can't see properly. I said, my double vision was horrendous. So there was a clock on the wall at the end of my bed, and there was another clock 2 meters that way. The wash hand basin it looked like it was on the floor, and people were walking in sort of sideways on, you know. It was just, I mean, no glass of wine will ever do that to you.
Yeah.
It was pretty frightening, actually. It was actually, looking back, it was quite traumatic. And I just remember lying there and trying to sort of rationalise it. So I'm looking at the cup at the side of my bed, has the water level, the cup was on its side, but the water level was straight. So I'm thinking, right, it's not on its side because the water would be falling out. So I'm trying to just think the process through. And, you know, eventually I kind of rationalised that, no, it's just something that's going on in my head. So the on-call neurosurgeons came to see me twice that night and said, you know, these things can happen, don't worry about it. Then he went off to speak to the nurse and said, you know, can I have a word outside? And I could hear them talking, and he said, we won't worry about this for the next 24, 48 hours. It can happen sometimes, you know. But I'm thinking, and what happens after that, you know?
Yeah.
You know, what's going to go on then? I don't want to go. I mean, I think my biggest fear was having to go through surgery again, because there's been such a sort of build up and expectation of what would be involved with that. I didn't want to have to go through any of that process again. And then, yeah, so that was the surgery. And I think probably within that 24 hours, gradually my world righted itself again, thankfully. My double vision was still really bad. So they gave me an eye patch to wear. So I rocked the pirate look for a bit. And then I had to start having physio, obviously, because I got out of bed. 2 physios came to see me. I mean, one of the biggest problem I had was nausea, because obviously, you know, you go through something like that, and you've got the effect of all the anaesthetic and painkillers that they've given you. And then on top of that, your brain's trying to figure out why there is no balance at all on one side, because when they gave me the gentamicin, because I'd had the hemorrhage, they didn't have time to assess the impact that it had on my balance. I could have done with another session, but I didn't have time for that. So that treatment hadn't worked as well as they'd hoped. So there was an element of confusion going on inside my head. I had 2 physios came to see me a few days later, because obviously at this point now I'm having to be put on blood thinners because of the risk of deep vein thrombosis through being stuck in bed. And they said, we really need to get you moving. So they sat me up on the bed, they unhooked as much of everything as they could to give me that bit of freedom to move. And they put a chair, it must have been about 1 metre away from me, and said, we're going to walk to that. Now, 6 months prior to that, I was running half marathons, and I was like, yeah, that's fine. And I got up and I tried to take a step, and it was the most bizarre feeling, because it was almost, there was a disconnect between what my brain was telling my legs to do and what my legs knew they had to do, but there was no sort of signal getting through. And I think it was at that point, really, I hit a bit of a low, because I just thought, I thought surgery was going to be the end of it, wake up, get back to normal. But actually that, I think for me, was the realisation that that would just be the start of the process. And it took me about 15 minutes, I think, to get to that chair.
Yeah, that's and something that it really impacted me was the whole world tilted to the side.
Yeah.
Because when this first happened to me, when I first got diagnosed with it, well, not even with when I got diagnosed, but when I first started experiencing the symptoms, Sarah, my world was tilted about 25 to 35 degrees to the right.
Right.
And I told my wife, I'm like, do you see that? And she's like, do you see what? I'm like, why is everything tilted? And she's like, nothing is tilted. And I'm like, yes. I'm like, the floor, the walls, the pictures on the wall, everything is tilted to its side, to the right side. So when I went to the hospital, panicking, I told the doctor, I'm like, doctor, everything is tilted. And he's like, no, it isn't. She's like, if you were tilted, why aren't you falling? And I said, I don't know, but everything is tilted. And that stayed with me for months, Sarah.
Yes.
Like, it happens every now and then still, but now I know, I rationalize, I'm like, it's just in my head, like it's, the world is not tilted. But when I read that in your book, that you say the whole world was tilted, yours was 90 degrees, and people were walking on the walls, I was like, I can imagine how trippy and how scary that must have been for you, because your mind tries to make sense of it, and you're like, what, like, how is this possible? How is the whole world on its side? So I feel for you, because that feeling is very, very frightening, for sure. So Sarah, most people after a surgery like this will take months, if not years, to recover. From what I read in the book, you were already jumping on a bicycle a couple of weeks after the surgery. So you were already trying to challenge your balance to be what it used to be, or as close to what it used to be prior to surgery. How was that process? Because you technically shouldn't have been doing that, but you did.
I know, I got told off. I think for me, I'd looked, I mean, probably like yourself, I'd gone online to look for sort of hope, you know, just like a positive outcome. And everything that I looked for acoustic neuroma was just horrible. There was nothing positive there. I mean, you've researched it, right? So you probably know for yourself that it's, you know, there's not a lot of positivity out there when it comes to acoustic neuromas. And I was damn determined that my story was not going to be like that, whatever. I was just absolutely adamant. I mean, fortunately for me, I've got some great motivating people around me that I can go and complain to, that tell me how, you know, kick me back into touch, if you like, you know, when I'm having a bad day. But yeah, I got myself out of hospital 6 days later. I went into hospital thinking I'll be out in 3 days, because this injection that I've had been shown to reduce hospital stay time. Obviously it didn't work as well as it should have done, so that was it. I was 3 days later, I was still throwing up in a bowl. I couldn't eat, and I certainly couldn't walk. But the following 3 days, I worked on walking to, as soon as I disconnected the catheter and all the cables were gone, and the drips were being, well, I think I just had one saline drip, so I could push that around. But I was walking, but I had a room to myself, so I'd ask the nurse to shut the door, and while they were out, I would get out of bed and I would just shuffle, and I'm talking like really slow shuffles, to the end of the bed, holding onto the little table that was there. And then eventually I set myself a goal of, right, I'm going to get to the bathroom. So I did that. And then I think I mentioned in the book, I got busted the first time I tried doing that, because just as I'd done what I needed to do and was about to open the bathroom door, the nurses came back in and were like, why are you out of bed? Then I had the physio guy come to see me again. And he said to me, we think you should take a walking frame home to help you. And, you know, people have said it before, that I don't need to say very much to express my emotions, because my face says it all. And he just took one look at me and he said, right, okay, I can see you're not impressed with that idea. I said, look, I walked in here and I'm going to walk out. So I did, 6 days after my surgery. And then I think the week after that, I just spent most of my time sleeping, which was fine, because I understood early on that's what my body needed to recover. But having been so active all the time, and having, you know, been looking forward to being on the other side of this journey, I was just so desperate to get out and walk and, you know, do all the things that I used to do, because I felt like I'd missed out on so much in that 6 months that I'd been ill. So one day my husband he'd been out riding with his friends, came back, left the bike in the back garden. And I sat there and I looked at it and I thought, can it really be so hard to get on a bike and just, you know, they say, don't they, once you've ridden a bike, you never forget how to do it. So I said to him, look, could you possibly just lower the seat for me? Because I tried and I couldn't even stand long enough to get on the bike. That's how bad it was. So he reluctantly, but he knows better than to argue, he lowered the saddle as low as it would go. And I held on to, like, I had patio chairs nearby, so I was using them to balance. I just sat on the bike and just lifted my feet up every now and then just to gauge what my balance was like, and it was rubbish. So I thought, right, I need to relearn how to do this whole process. So I went back to, you know, how children learn to ride a bike. And, you know, when you look at a young toddler, they don't use pedals, they push themselves along with their feet. So I thought, right, that's what I'm going to do. And that day, I must have gone up and down my garden about 50 times, just going backwards and forwards, just pushing myself along with my feet until I felt like, okay, I feel more comfortable with this now. And then from that, I put one foot on the pedal and just sort of turned it once and put it on the floor again, just to gradually build up. And then I think after a few days of doing that, felt like I was starting to make a bit of progress. So we took the bikes down to a private lane where there's no traffic. And I pedalled up and down. He followed me. I've got video. It's not very professional looking, and I'm wobbling all over the place. But yeah, so he followed me, and we just went up and down this quiet lane, and you know, and it worked. So, you know, that's what I try to say to people. It's not easy, because people look at me now and think, but you can ride a bike. And I was like, yeah, but there was like a 90% chance I probably wouldn't be able to. And it hasn't been an easy process at all. You know, there's a lot of people see you ride, but they don't see the 50 times going up and down in your garden. And they also don't see that after that, you're that sort of exhausted with having to compensate for the lack of balance, because now this side of my brain's having to work twice as hard as it did before to compensate for what's missing on the other side. So, you know, people don't see that you then go home and you cry and you're tired and you have to sleep for hours, and, you know, so yeah, there's a lot of things people don't see. But yeah, I was out on my bike, I think that was 3 or 4 weeks after my surgery. I shouldn't have been doing anything for 6 weeks.
Yeah. Well, and we'll get a little bit into what you did after, because your book is called Sickbed to Summits: The Story of Triumph Over Adversity by Sara Crosland. And I want to check a few parts in here that really resonated with me, and you can let me know what these words meant to you at the moment. And one of them is in page 21. You said, when this first started your journey, you said, I wasn't living anymore, I was merely existing. Why do you say that?
Because for me, and again, you know, we take so much for granted in life, don't we? You know, you can get up, you can go to the shops, you can drive your car, you can go for a walk, you can walk your dog, you can do things for your children. You know, that for me is living. And, you know, at that point that you speak about there, I was in bed. I would wake up in the morning and there was about 2 seconds where I felt normal-ish. And then I would start to be sick, and I had to have sick bags at the side of my bed. So I'd wake up, I'd literally roll over and I'd be sick. Just to get out of bed became an entire process that at first was totally overwhelming, until I kind of changed the way I thought about it. And I just had to, rather than look at the the big picture, you know, the whole task, just break it down. Like I had done prior to my surgery, don't look at the whole, you know, 3 weeks till the surgery, just take each day at a time, each hour at a time, each minute at a time if I had to. And this was the same, you know, I had to think, right, I'm going to sit up. So I got it in my head, I'm going to sit up. I'd roll over and I'd push myself up. Okay, I'm sitting up now, what's next? And the whole, that was my life, just thinking through every single process, because I was so very unwell, and particularly after the hemorrhage, I became, you know, really unwell after that. So yeah, I wasn't living. I wasn't, you know,
surviving. Yeah.
I was just, I couldn't run, I couldn't ride my bike, I couldn't do things with my family, I couldn't go out on my own. You know, I was just existing. I was just lying there and breathing. Really, it was that bad.
Yeah, something else that you said in page 25 that really, really resonates with me is true friends walking when everyone else has walked out. What do you mean by that?
Oh, this is something actually that it still to this day upsets me, that people I thought I knew well, people that I respected, people that I've known for many years, you know, that I considered to be good friends, in my moment of need, very few of them stuck around. You know, a few of them would send a text and say, hope you're okay, you know, and that was it. Yet there were people that I knew who I'd not been, you know, I wouldn't have said they were really close friends, but those are the people that I least expected that then would come round and offer to cook, who bought me cake, who bought cakes for my kids, who called when I was taken in with the hemorrhage and offered to cook meals for the family, who drove me to appointments because I couldn't drive, you know, and they were sort of the ones that were there for me. The people that I thought were really good friends were nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's very, very true and happens more often than not.
Yeah.
In page 55, chapter 4, when you left the hospital and you were doing your research online, you said, Neil did his best to convince me that for every negative comment online, there will be 10 positive outcomes where people have recovered and moved on with their lives. Why do you say that?
I think, you know, there's a great place for support on social media, but it's very hard to lose sight of the fact that those are the people that maybe haven't had a great outcome, that, you know, still do need a lot of support, still do need to hear the right things, but there can also be quite a bit of negativity around that as well.
Yes.
You know, so Neil was trying his best to sort of convince me that, you know, it wasn't all going to be negative, and that's just like a sort of selection from, you know, the group of people that might have been diagnosed. And that again sort of fueled me in some ways once I was well enough to sort of push myself to do well, to try and put a bit more positivity out there and to show people that you can have, you know, you can live a good life despite going through. It just takes hard work and determination, which I think some people are a bit reluctant to put in.
Yeah, and you're one of those success stories, and now you're sharing it with the world, which allows other people to see, hey, Sara succeeded at overcoming this, so maybe I can too, you know, like you give them hope. Mm-hmm. Sara, on page 77, this boiled my blood when I read this chapter because it was about you not being able to qualify for assistance from the government, for financial assistance. When I read this chapter, I was so enraged, and you said here, I wasn't ill enough or immobile enough to qualify for even the lower level of personal independence payment, and therefore you were viewed as fit to work, regardless of all the side effects and all the symptoms that you were experiencing. How did that make you feel?
I think my blood was boiling too, but I think I was just overwhelmed with it really, because I I had my studio that I was trying to keep open, because now that was my only income, and you know, I knew that I would struggle to hold down a regular job because of the neuro fatigue that I was suffering with. You know, I'd kind of been banking on getting some financial support through. My dad had to help me pay the rent for the studio, and I had bookings that I shouldn't have done. I was told not to work for 16 weeks post-op. So I think my first booking that I had in was 5 weeks. So I went in and I did. It was a young, I think it was a little girl, her cake smashed for her birthday. And, you know, I'd not told anybody that had booked what was wrong. So, you know, they turned up for their photo shoot, and I've got my hair tied back, and I've got a big scar running around the side of my head. It probably looked quite scary, actually. And, you know, I felt really awful afterwards, but I couldn't set up the studio with what I needed. I had to get help. I had to have Neil come in to help me change the backdrops, because I shouldn't be lifting anything that might put pressure on my head. I couldn't blow up the balloons for this session because of putting pressure on my head and causing a CSF leak. You know, so many things I had to be careful of, and you know, and this was just one 1 hour photo shoot was just so full of risk. I sat there and I was trembling with the camera, you know, as I'm doing it, thinking, what am I doing to myself? But I had no option. So yeah, I did go back to work sooner than I should have done. You know, and I still do that now, but I still struggle to this day with fatigue, which again is hard to explain to people, like going to see the assessor for the payments. You know, there's so much, I think, with anything neurological, and you probably know this yourself, that there's an awful lot that goes on that can't be seen, and people can be very dismissive and very judgmental about that. You know, even now there are days I have to go lie down in the middle of the afternoon, and that's just the way it is. And you know, it's took me 2 years to sort of accept that's how it is now. But yeah.
it just enrages me, because it kind of adds insult to injury, because you're trying to rely on the government that you assume is going to help you in a time of need, and when that time of need comes, they kind of wash their hands, and it's like, oh, we think you're okay to fend for yourself, so figure it out. That's not fair. That's not fair, because like you said, you feel dismissed, you feel judged, and then they're putting this pressure on you that you already have a lot of pressure trying to heal as it is, and now you have to have this pressure of how am I going to survive paying my bills, buying food, if I cannot even function as a normal person right now. So that chapter, Sarah, that got me going. Like, yeah, page 115, you said regret can be consuming and dangerous. I think this is one of the things that has led my new attitude and drive. That feeling of never knowing what lies ahead and how it will affect your plans. So you now, from what I've seen in your page on Instagram and from what I read in your book, you do not take life for granted. You've done a lot of amazing things that most people haven't even thought of doing. You climb, you hike amazing mountains. You did activities that for some people might be too risky to do, and you did them because you don't take life for granted. What inspires you to do these things that are quote unquote risky, but to you they are actually living and enjoying your life?
One of the things that I'd always wanted to do is a skydive, and I write about that in the book. Yeah. And it's quite funny, actually, because I can go back on Facebook, and you know how the memories pop up.
Yeah.
And I think going back to about 2015, I'd posted something, who'd like to do a skydive with me for charity? And nobody took me up on it. And it was one of those things I kind of just dismissed, and oh, I'll do it one day. So when I found out I'd need surgery, I just remember thinking, well, that's the end of that then. You know, who's going to let me go up at altitude with a hole in my head. And so I kind of thought, well, you know, that's never going to happen. And it was horrible, you know, so many things that one day I'll do it. And, you know, and that's all it is. It's just a thought. You never actually commit to doing it. Whereas now, I think, you know, having gone through this process and knowing how, you know, in a day, things can change. And so now if I have an idea, I think, right, I'm going to do it. My husband is great, but I think he just thinks I'm totally bonkers. Yeah, he's not as risk averse as me. He has been great and very supportive, but like Tubcal, I, you know, talked about doing that years ago, and I never made plans to do it. And so, you know, once I was given the all clear to take part in activities like that, I thought, right, I'm going to do it. So I think it was October 2018, so it was about 5 months after my surgery. I did a skydive for charity. I'm doing it again. All being well, next month I've got another skydive coming up, so that should be good. Again, it's for a children's cancer charity. So, you know, it's nice to use these events to give something back. I completed the Yorkshire 3 Peaks Challenge. So over in the UK, there's a county, Yorkshire, which is quite sort of mountainous. So it's the 3 highest peaks: Ingleborough, Pennygent and Whernside. So with some friends from a outdoor group that we belong to, we went and did that, and that was around the first anniversary of my surgery, so 2019. Then we went to the Alps. I had a great time in the Alps in 2019. We had gone back just after my surgery because I felt really well. I felt like I'd achieved a lot in a short, you know, goals that I'd set myself for my recovery for like 12 months, I'd completed within like 3 months. So I thought, you know, I'll be great to get back over there and do some hiking and stuff. And we did. We went over in 2018. It was around October time again, and I love the Alps. I love Chamonix. Amazing place, amazing people, the most incredible scenery, and I really struggled. The weather was great. The fatigue, I'd completely underestimated how much it would impact me spending day after day walking. So I came back and I was angry with myself. I was disappointed. I was just really annoyed that my body had let me down. I was annoyed that I wasn't clearly as well as I thought I was. And then so you find with recovery, it doesn't just go and improve like this. It kind of can go up and down a bit. And I'd kind of gone up and down for a little bit and then crashed big time. So mentally, I wasn't in a great place after that. But I used the 3 Peaks Challenge as a new focus for me. So after the end of 2018, that became my focus in the summer. And so I trained really hard for that. We were supposed to complete it in under 12 hours and we did it, I think it was 10 hours, 19 minutes or something, which I was happy with. And then, later that year, we went back to the Alps and did some Via Ferrata climbing out there, which was great. And then when I came back, the opportunity presented itself to me to climb Tubcal in Morocco in the Atlas Mountains with a friend, Keris. And she'd already arranged to go, and somebody she was travelling with had had an accident training and broken their hand, so they couldn't go, and there was this place available. And again, it comes back to that, regret. And I said to her at first, I can't do it, I can't afford it. We've just come back from this trip and we already had a trip to Poland booked later in the year. I said, I can't afford it. And she said, right, forget that. She said, do you want to do it? I was like, yeah. So she helped me, finance the trip. So we sorted all that out, and I flew out I think it was the end of September 2019, and we climbed Mount Toubkal, which is the highest peak in the Atlas Mountains. It's the highest I'd ever done at that time, and it was brilliant. Absolutely loved it.
And I believe it was in that trip that you, on the way, you saw a lot of people that live, let's say, simple lives that for some people might consider poor lives, because we are very spoiled in first world countries like,
Yeah.
like Canada and the UK. So you mentioned here, the other people that you met on your way, they had none of the luxuries that we often crave and were accustomed to. Their lives were comparably simplistic, and yet everyone whose path we crossed was smiling, happy, and content. They all helped each other too. This will stay with me for a long time, and I'm certain there is a lesson to be learned here. And it's that resonated with me, because you're right, Sarah. A lot of people were often trapped into this rat race that we need the most expensive house, the nicest car. We need to have money. We need to afford trips and things like that. But you meet people in places that live a very simplistic life. They don't have a lot of clothing. They may have one or two different articles of clothing. They don't have a lot of luxuries. They don't have an expensive home. Yet they seem so happy because they don't take life for granted like we often do. So that part of your journey was very inspiring to me. And you mentioned also you had a big companion in all these amazing summits and climbs and hikes, which was doubt. Doubt was always showing up in your head, telling you, no, you're not well enough, no, you're not strong enough, your balance is not good enough, so don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Yet you persisted, and you showed doubt that you are in control and doubt is not in control. And you said, this experience has been a dream come true, a dream I had once thought might never be, and one that might have never have been had I listened to doubt. I come to realize just how much I was still capable of achieving despite the many obstacles that I still face. Why do you say that?
I think it's easy in life to listen to that voice in your head that says you can't, your brain can be, your best friend and your worst enemy. And I've come to realize that, your brain is trying to keep you safe. Your brain recognizes risk as being, potentially life-threateningly dangerous. Even just, something like applying for a new job, you might be rejected, it might be hard, you might find it really difficult. What are you doing? What are you giving up? And it's all these little sort of areas of friction that your brain is trying to sort of keep you safe. But you can't live when you are so safe that you do nothing.
Yeah.
So for me, I think to personify doubt in a way as a character was one way to make people realize just how real it can be. I can plan things. I've got a couple of challenges planned, over the next 2 years, and I still have that element of doubt every now and then. It's, you won't be able to finance it, you won't be able to do the distance, you've never climbed something that technical before, all these thoughts. And I just have to sort of stop, dismiss them and think, okay, I haven't done it yet, but what's to say that I won't? And now I can set myself a goal, and rather than listening to doubt and not do it, I set myself a goal, and then I work backwards to where I am now, and I try and figure out all the steps that I need to take to get there. But I do it in reverse. So I set myself the goal and then worry about how to achieve it afterwards.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And Sarah, to close the last chapter of the book, you said, while my diagnosis was devastating and life-changing, and I wish it had never happened, I feel blessed that it has changed my perspective on life in so many ways. Only by going through an experience like that can you ever truly understand. But I hope that I've shown you a little bit through the book. So many of us often think that the conditions that we get are the biggest curse that happened to us. However, you manage to see your condition and spin it into a positive outcome, and to make yourself stronger, to stay harder than ever, to stay consistent, to exercise, to push your limits and boundaries. What give you that power? What gave you that inspiration to not play yourself as a victim, but to actually own the condition and be like, I am going to be a success story and not a failure story? What inspired that in you?
I've always been quite a determined person anyway. I think I can be quite stubborn. And when you're in a situation where your ability to do anything is just taken away from you, you are literally the victim. And it was, you know, don't get me wrong, I still have days where I lie in bed in the morning and I just think, do you know what, I just can't be bothered. But I get up, and you know, I get up, I get dressed, I make my bed, and I get on with my day. So before that voice in my head starts talking me out of, you know, getting up and doing what I need to do, I start doing something. As soon as I can feel that I'm going to slip into that rut, I don't give myself a chance to do that. I will actively go and find something to do. I might just go put the kettle on, make a coffee. You know, as soon as those thoughts come into my head, I'll go and do something. And that for me was, I mean, that's something I was told to do by the guys that I mentioned in the book. Those friends of mine that are in the military, you know, they're very much, you know, of a different mindset than most of the population I know. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, whilst it works well for them in their world, that there are aspects of that we can use in our everyday lives. So, you know, rather than sit about, you know, thinking about everything I've got to do, but I'm too tired, I can't do it, I've got no one to help me, I'll go and find something that I can do, and I put my focus, you know, on the things that I can do rather than what I can't. And again, it, you know, it comes down to the fact that there was so much negativity out there when I was diagnosed that I'd had enough of it, and I was literally just sick of negativity. So I just thought, right, well, I'm going to do what I can do, and if it helps prove to somebody else that they can do it too, then that's, you know, it makes going through that experience worthwhile in some respects. You know, something good has come out of it. All right, I've suffered in the meantime, but if it helps somebody else along the way, you know, and by sharing my experiences and creating those experiences that I can share, if that helps other people to be able to live their lives after going through something like this, then that's something that I'll just keep doing.
Yeah. What does the future hold for Sara?
Oh. Okay, so we're kind of we're in lockdown again at the moment. We have been since, I think, the 4th of January. This is our 3rd national lockdown. So currently I can't work, so I've got lots of time to focus on training, which is great. I should have been running an ultramarathon last June, but that was cancelled because of COVID. My entry was deferred to this year, so I'm hoping, I've got everything crossed, it will go ahead. So yeah, a 100-kilometre ultramarathon in the Lake District in the UK, which is quite a hilly, mountainous area. So that's in June. Then I'd like to climb Mont Blanc over in the Alps. So that's on my list, but we need to be able to travel. And I'd also like to do Mount Kenya, I think it's called the Batiam Peak, which is the highest peak, but requires a technical climb to reach the summit. So yeah, rather than, I mean, I had wanted to do Kilimanjaro, but it's become a bit of a tourist trap these days from what I hear. And I thought, I don't really fancy standing in a queue of 300 people waiting to summit. So I'll go for something a bit more remote and a bit trickier to do. Yeah, so that's my 3 or 4 main goals that I've got planned for the next couple of years. But, you know, everything at the moment is so much out of our control with regards to the pandemic. But again, I think having gone through the experience of having no control over my circumstances with my illness has helped me to sort of get my head around, you know, travel restrictions and plans being changed, and no end date in sight. So I think, again, it was a rubbish thing to happen to me, but it's helped me mentally to deal with going through this whole pandemic.
Yeah. Sarah, where can people find you and where can they get the book?
Okay, so it's available on Amazon, but if you want to find the book directly, you can buy it from a website. So it's www.saracrossland.com, and then you can look /books, and the book is there. There's lots of other information about, things that I'm doing as well. So I go and speak to schools and colleges and workplaces about hidden disabilities and, motivation and goal setting. So if you go onto the website, you'll be able to find the book there quite easily.
Okay, awesome. And Sarah, my last question to you is, as you know, this channel is called Find Your Chappiness, so find your happiness. What does Sara do to find her chappiness?
Oh, I go outside. Got to be outside. I run most. Well, we can only go out for one sort of session of exercise a day. So I've been doing an awful lot of running. But just that getting outside and spending time in nature and just, finding the smallest bit of green in a built-up area, there's always something that you can just, spend a bit of time thinking about. And getting outside for me, that's my happy place.
Nice, very nice. Well, Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. As I mentioned, I read your book twice and I highly recommend it to people. It's a brilliant book. Like, it's the way how you put the words with such emotion behind them makes it so much more real. And not only if people are struggling with an invisible illness, but also for people that are healthy, this applies into their daily lives because it encourages them to not take life for granted. So excellent work in the book. Great book. And yes, I hope we can chat again soon. And I'm very happy to see that you're doing great. And keep up because you're an inspiration to many people on Instagram. I see a lot of people that follow you, and me myself, I see how you often are challenging yourself to do bigger, better things. So keep it up.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. All right, Sarah. Have a nice day.
And you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.